another place to put different words after his name.
It's true. That's the real reason we get to track where Shane's working this way.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, welcome to the July 30th meeting of Gateway API. We've got a fairly short agenda today that is entirely focused on v1.2. I think entirely focused on 1.2. Feel free, as always, to go ahead and drop in anything else that you might want to talk about on today's agenda. Just a friendly reminder, this is a Kubernetes Kubernetes community meeting, which means we abide by the CNCF Code of Conduct. Just means be nice to each other. And also, since I don't know if I recognize everyone on this call, if anyone is new or just wants to say hi, give you a couple minutes to introduce yourself. Completely optional, but if you want to, love to hear what brings you here.
Well, I'm Flynn, and I'm here to listen to Shane randomly talk about where he is in bees.
Perfect.
I'm Shane, and I'm here to talk about Commodore Amigas.
No, hell yeah. Nice.
Am I on the right meeting for that? I thought I was.
Yeah, Rob, you added that to the agenda, right?
I'll work on it.
We're waiting to hear the ham route. Route's not really the ham policy CRD. That's what we want. Shane's probably the only other person here who will get that joke. So maybe it's time to move on and dispense with introductions.
I'll go for it. Cool. All right. I think, Lior, this must be yours. First up, supporter features. I think you are just looking for a final list of basically your final opportunity to ask for changes. Otherwise, this change is happening as is. Is that correct?
Yeah, I wanted to call out that we got a bunch of feedback here, but it feels like we're getting some consensus on like implementing something that could be useful. And yeah, this one's been open for a while. So yeah, just wanted an opportunity for everyone who wants to pop in and leave feedback by end of day, because we really want to get this change in 1.2. And just to clarify, this is a change to so this is a change like not to graduate it as standard. This is a change to the experimental version, and then it will need to soak for a bit, and then if it's successful, will be graduated as standard.
Perfect. Thank you. And I do want to call out that I think we've had a good amount of discussion on this PR now, but the big takeaway for me is this is a breaking change. And we say we can do that with experimental features. We haven't done that as much as we thought we would, but this is a breaking change. So just if you're implementing this feature, if you've already implemented this feature, please watch out. Please be careful. I've made a case that we could use some more separation between experimental and standard, but that is a rabbit hole for another day. But for now, this is the world we have. Cool. And I for myself personally, I think this is good to go as is. So I can hit the final approve. I think we've got enough approvals already on this. Sometime maybe 12 hours from now. Cool.
Thanks.
All right, next up is the 1.2 discussion. So we've got a lot of things coming up, but basically this is just a reminder that the get freeze is today. We agreed to this 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. I don't know when we set this date, but it's arrived. So congratulations, everyone. I think I talked with other maintainers, and this is the first time we've done anything like this. So I think if you are finding yourself just squeezed a little too much, but you think you could fit something in the next 2 days, just let us know. And I think 2 days is around the window that we're okay with squeezing this deadline if needed. But in general, we want this to be the end or very close to the end of this cycle. So with that said, for gaps that are new to experimental, named route rules is good to go. Percentage-based request mirroring, also good to go. Marcin, I'm not sure if Marcin is on this call, but if he is, back in MTLS configuration, I think he pushed some significant updates yesterday.
I think Marcin is on this call, actually.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
I'm
perfect.
here, and yes, I retracted per service overload from the proposal, as it was fairly controversial and it had non-trivial security implications. And I believe that the root cause for this non-trivial security implication was that the persona ownership for backend TLS policy is not very clear. I mean, I started this discussion here, inspired by the discussion in the CL, in the pull request, and the currently backend TLS policy lives in the same namespace as the service, but it contains configuration that seems to be more owned by the infra owner. So maybe it's not the best pick for the place for the backend TLS policy. And we just wanted to put this for the discussion. And because we are short on time, I think we should first figure out the placement for the backend TLS policy, which is currently experimental, and only then consider doing the overrides, per service overrides at the backend TLS policy level. So yeah, that's more or less it.
Thanks for opening this
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, if you want to say more, go ahead, Mike.
Oh yeah, just I definitely like this is exactly the discussion needs to be happening. So thank you for starting this and providing like all the different implications. I am inclined to ask for and be supportive of the additional 2 days here because I really want to make sure that we run this by folks at Azure because I know that we have already implemented something similar and are intending to implement whatever we end up going with here. So I want to make sure I get eyes on it internally.
Okay, that's
Do you
fair.
think- Do you think a couple of days is enough?
I hope so. I would know if it's like clearly not like we're completely off, then yeah, like would raise that at that time. But I don't anticipate it being like a couple days and then a couple more, then a couple more. It's either going to be like, okay, we can do this, or no, this is terrible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I want to reread this one, which I should be able to do in the next day or so. So,
yeah, let's
Um,
aim for reviews in the next 24 hours, because if we're trying to have
Yeah.
this get merged in 48 hours, then 24 hours for reviews would be ideal. Go ahead, Flint. Sorry.
A lot of my reaction at the moment is just to look over the number of comments that are still open on the PR and kind of go, that's interesting. But yeah, all right. Reading for me.
Yeah, I think despite comments being open, I think most of them would be in the category of resolved now and just haven't been clear. You know, I think it's just, does this look good to you kind of thing. So hopefully that's okay. I think this discussion is far and away the most controversial part in this area, and it
Which
is
is-
not blocking.
Yeah, I think the because of the short time and not wanting to work under pressure here, I think even if we want to add per service override, we should do this in the next iteration. So I removed it from the scope of the proposal as it was fairly controversial, and will have time to align on backend TLS policy placement and the persona module. So when we reach the alignment here, it would be easier to decide how we want to proceed with per service overrides.
That seems like a good idea. Without having to dive into the details yet, I am optimistic about that. So I'll take a closer look today.
One interesting thing about the persona thing is the question of to what extent does sorry, let me try phrasing that in a less roundabout way. What changes about namespaces and backend TLS policies if Anna owns or does not own backend TLS policy? And I'm not, I don't necessarily have an answer to that in my head. That is something that I shall be looking for and commenting on in the discussion.
Yes, that is very much scope of discussion. I have been uncomfortable with it being the service owner for quite some time, as the primary owner. But yes,
Yeah.
I think we've kind of mixed and matched concepts that, you know, like at least S&I that does believe, like I feel like Anna does own that, but the rest I don't. So
They're
messy.
yeah, I mean, TLS is really messy from the persona point of view because Anna probably cares a lot about what host names you use to talk to her, but she really probably doesn't wants to think about certificates. So yeah, it gets interesting. We also get into interesting situations like my immediate reaction is, oh, well, it shouldn't be a problem to have everything in the same namespace, whether Anna owns it or not. And then you start thinking about Anna deciding to smite the whole namespace and recreate it for some reason, right? So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yep.
I think it's probably also worth pointing out that in small organizations, these may be the same person, but it's still worth separating the roles, right?
And one follow-up here is that in the discussion here in this gap, there were interesting security implications raised. And I think that if we clarify, even if we decide that backend TLS policy should stay in the service namespace, but we clarify that RBAC permissions shouldn't be given to Anna in that case. This should also simplify decision making around these per service overrides. So yeah, but I don't want to push too early on this.
Yeah, I think the right call for now is exactly what you've done. Of you know, there's this gap. I think has been simplified to the least controversial bits, which is a client cert on gateway, the SANs, and I think that's it, right? Like I think that's
Options as well.
TLS options. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's also just basically copying something like we have on listener TLS and dropping it down to backend TLS. So hopefully not too bad.
And that's still
Cool.
a string map right now. That didn't get changed.
Yeah.
I'm sure Nick is delighted by that.
Oh, yes. It's his favorite part of this entire gap for sure.
So
he loves things that look like annotations but aren't called annotations.
Even though they have annotation in the name, yeah. I feel very strange for trying to sort of channel Nick on this one, but what do we have for a path in tightening that up if in the future, if we come up with some better defined common TLS options? I don't think we get to change the type of options into something more structured without having weird things happen with validation. Can anybody
Yeah.
have a
No, you're
counter
right.
argument there?
That's completely right.
Should we maybe, I mean, this is still experimental, right? Should we maybe give that a name that makes it a little more clear that we might change it? Or do we just go, no, this is an area where we're fully expecting a breaking change a little bit down the road?
So I don't think it has to be a breaking change. Like the way that we've approached this over in the listener TLS options is basically things like setting a min TLS version are fine in there and can be implementation specific. And the intent is that eventually they move out of there and become like a first class field on the root object rather than like a specific string type in that app.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. The idea that this gives a place for implementations to experiment with new features with the idea that we will standardize on the features that exist here and bring them into top level fields over time.
Where's the
And then-
balance? Like we could stick in this situation for a while, and then it will be hard to converge again.
Yeah, there's always
the danger.
risk. Yeah. It's the challenge of a portable API and a multi-vendor API in this case is that you're trying to get implementations to use this to buy into it, but also most implementations are going to have more config available at this level than we have in this API. So the idea is, do you want everyone to copy this API and add 2 new fields, or use options until they're upstream? I don't know.
Well, it also is interesting because it ties into some of the stuff that I added for the very tail end of this agenda about gRPC route, where there are ways that I kind of feel like we got a little bit wounded by people not wanting to use it early and, missing feedback and all that. So yeah, overall, I think I would rather get this out there this way and try to get some people to use it and give feedback on it.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Marcin. This is great to see this one in. So recap, we'll aim to get all feedback in as much as possible in the next 24 hours. And then anything beyond that will just be iteration. And if anyone has, what they consider blocking concerns, or they see something, they say, oh man, like let's just not merge this at all in this cycle. Let's have that conversation maybe in Slack, or I mean, GitHub. You can call it out on GitHub too. But yeah, cool. All right, and then I do just one last call out. This discussion is very, very. I think this deserves a lot of time. This is not blocking 1.2. This is kind of orthogonal, but I think it would be great to get some more comments on that. All right, Dave, I don't know if you're on this call, but gateway merging and hierarchy, this one feels like it's got a ways to go still, but I think you pushed some updates last night as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna push. I'm gonna do some more work after this call as well.
Apparently, I have the wrong link in here. If anyone is okay to update the link in the, I know you created a new PR, Dave.
I have it. I'll update it.
Cool. I just found it.
I have not yet commented this on that thing, but the more there's some discussion in there about, oh, maybe we don't actually need TCP route and we can just do it with gateway merging. And as I think about that, I am becoming less and less comfortable with that idea because of the role separation between who's likely to be able to mess with gateways and who's likely to want to mess with TCP routes.
So the rationale is that the people who were given access to TCP route would be given access to listener set, not gateway. Listener set on itself cannot actually do cannot like it doesn't actually claim an address. It doesn't have all the things that a gateway does. So
But you know what? Never mind. I'm going to go write this down rather than getting into a conversation about it right now.
that's fair. Yeah. And I think one of the things that is interesting about this gap, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but I think the way you've done this is because it's single namespace, there's no need for any changes on gateway, or the changes on gateway are very, very minimal. Yeah, it's allowed listeners. Is that?
Yeah. Essentially, you might not want people to be able to attach listener sets to an existing gateway. So by default, I think it allows it, but then you can turn it off explicitly.
Yeah.
I like that.
There's probably
Okay.
some use case for it. I don't know if people want to not include it, but for that.
Well, if we don't know what the use case is, then I would be inclined to not include it immediately.
Which
But
use case? The use case for not allowing listener sets to attach?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think strongly in favor of that use case. I think some gateway owners are going to want to.
that's tantamount to saying some gateway owners are going to want to disallow TCP routes in some namespaces, which is a policy at the organizational level that we should not dictate.
No, so you can already do that in gateway. Like
I
there's
know, and
allowed
that's a
routes
problem.
kinds. Why is that a problem?
Because it's a policy at the organizational level. There are organizations that don't want that, and we are currently forcing them to adopt that policy.
There are organizations that don't want to allow TCP route, or
There are organizations that don't want to be bothered with having to explicitly permit everything for a particular cluster.
I feel like more could be said about this, but I'm generally I'm
think
pretty behind Flynn on this one. I think it
I
could
think
be said
that-
differently, but
Yeah, I also was going to say, I don't know. This is something that I feel like I should go through and try to write out in more depth.
yeah.
So
But
that
I
we
get
can
what
have
you're saying.
a more reasonable conversation about it rather than just diving into it right this second. But that is the root of some of my concern, not with merging gateways. I think it makes an enormous amount of sense to merge gateways where they can be merged, right? Excuse me. But I think that the part of the conversation that involves taking the concept of a route, which really belongs to people at one level of the hierarchy, and then trying to merge that with the concept of a gateway, which is at a different level in terms of permissions and such, I think that that is problematic. And saying, well, it's just the listener set and not actually a route or not actually a gateway is kind of just introducing another thing that the app developer needs to worry about instead of just leaving it all with routes that they're used to thinking about, or probably at least more used to thinking about.
I think that holds water when routes have substance to them, but when routes are literally nothing then other than a list of backends and a pointer to a gateway.
Yeah, but from the app developer's point of view, they're still thinking about it as a route, not not going off to be derailed. Oh, wait, this is really a gateway.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that is the root of the complexity here, right?
So let's just,
Mike,
play this through.
So there are two comments from two different mics to the tune of, yeah, maybe we should defer this for something to be written out so that we can all grok it more fully. And I'm completely down with that, especially because we could go on like this for the rest of the time here. So
yes. One last comment. What if listener set was called listener route? No. What if yes, I am looking forward.
Yeah.
I am looking forward to your comments. and I think this one feels like it's going to be very difficult to get in the time allotted this week, but I don't want to give up on it. And I definitely, even if this isn't merged, I want to bring this idea really well thought out, written up, etc., to our like SIGNet review of the API, because
Yeah.
this is a big change, and I want to make sure we, before we get to that point, we have an agreement on a path forward, so that even if it's not an API change in 1.2, we've got good consensus for 1.3 for what we're doing.
Yeah, let me also point out, to be clear, that this PR is describing a provisional thing, not a standard thing. And I am certainly not going to be going, oh, no, we can't say this provisionally even, right? So if we can get everything else sorted out and, great, let's go ahead and do it and, try to set a direction and bring it up at the API review and all that. Maybe this is another place where they have the opportunity to practice some breaking changes in the protocol, right?
One thing I'll call out as you're reviewing this, I would appreciate some comments or clarification if somebody chooses to approve this or say they're good with the direction. If you could call that out as I'm good with merging this as provisional, or I'm good with merging this as implementable, because those are pretty distinct. Provisional just is, we think this is a good starting point, but we don't want to start implementing this yet. Whereas implementable would be actually this should be in scope for 1.2. So please clarify that. Yeah. So any last? Dave, I didn't give you much of an opportunity to talk
Sorry,
much about
Dave.
this one. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the big ones are on here, whether we allow no listeners on the gateway if people implement this feature is one. And then I think one issue I think I'm for, but Rob wasn't for, is like if you attach a route to a listener set. I was saying that route attaches to the listeners in that set only and not to the parent gateway.
Oh, I think I was confused there. What I meant is that you should be able to attach a route to a listener set and to the parent gateway separately, but like not that attaching to a listener set should automatically mean it attaches to every listener in the parent as well.
Okay, yeah, so we're on the same page then, but I can add that
Okay.
example. I can add that example. So I'm just gonna go through the comments after this call and kind of highlight it. I think like Nick just wants to copy the accepted and program definitions into it, which I think makes sense. There's this one line about, or I wrote, is up to the implementation whether invalid listener affects other listeners in the gateway, which is 336. That one to me just kind of means like, hey, existing listeners will work if I have an invalid one. Yeah, 338, sorry. But I haven't read your reply, Rob, so I gotta see that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be a popular one, but again, it's just yeah,
If
whether
an
you drop
implementation-
everything.
As an example,
That's bizarre.
with the current gateway, if I have listeners 443 and 80, but 443 is like misconfigured in some way, like I still would, I think it's up to the implementation right now, whether 80 is still working, even though 443 is broken, as an example. I'm just kind of highlighting the same thing here. So that's why I was confused by Nick's comment, because I thought that's exactly how gateways work.
It is how, I mean, I think we've in practice ended up with something like this where we either encourage, I think most implementations are encouraged to fail fast.
Yeah.
But that becomes painful when you have an increasingly large gateway or merged set of gateways. At least in this case, maybe. Go ahead, Flynn.
kind of with Dave on this one. If you misconfigure port 443, failing fast on 443 and allowing 80 to continue to work does not seem to be incompatible with the idea of failing fast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but this is, I think what Nick is saying here is important in the sense that like we should have some kind of standard recommendation, something like here, instead of just saying implementations can do whatever they want, which is how I would interpret this right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So I will add some follow-up to this after, and then maybe in the day Pacific, people should be good to review or review tomorrow.
Cool. Great. Okay. And then the next one on the list is request timeouts for gRPC route. Christine, thank you for volunteering for this one. I know you got a ton of feedback. I think I may have seen a comment from you suggesting that it may be too much. Oh, apparently I've got some pending comments. I think I had pending comments and then I saw Richard's review and I'm like, I've got nothing to add. So Richard gave...
there's a lot of work to be done, and there was a few comments that just alluded to we do need to address the bidirectional. I thought we could get away with doing like the unary and then, iterating on that, but I think we do need to address that as well. So I don't think it'll be out for this release, but good conversation so far in there.
Yes,
Did you mean to,
yeah.
Did you mean
Go
to
ahead.
say bidirectional or streaming or both?
Both, all of the above.
It feels strange to me that a gRPC route, wow, how do I even phrase this one? It feels to me that if you have a gRPC route that goes from workload A to workload B, and then there's a separate request coming from B back to A, that kind of feels like it ought to be covered by a separate route, even though it happens to be the same connection. Do we really feel like gRPC routes should try to somehow magically cover both directions for requests?
Wait, you'll need to explain that. Say that again, sorry.
gRPC route right now is basically describing a request that is being delivered to a given workload, right?
Sure.
So if that workload then turns around and makes a request back to somebody, to the workload that just called it, should that not be a separate gRPC route that covers that? Do we really want to get into the issue of, oh, since this connection happens to involve bidirectional things, we have to specify both directions in the same gRPC route? That feels interesting and bizarre.
I don't know, it also seems bizarre to require it in both directions, but I think this is a great call out for you to leave some comments and have a discussion with Richard on this one, because
yeah. There were some comments on this one about the proxyless meshes stuff.
I was gonna follow up with that too.
Yeah. Is this the current status though, Flynn, what you're describing?
I'm sorry, say again?
Is this the current status that you're describing, that we do need to specify both?
I don't think we've ever talked before about bidirectional gRPC.
I see.
I think the assumption is simply that it's always unidirectional. So
right, but
unidirectional, not necessarily unary.
Yeah, but currently implementations that implement gRPC, so they only use it for unidirectional?
I have no idea.
What implementations even implement gRPC route right now?
Linkerd is starting to implement gRPC route. There are a bunch of Ingress controllers that do it, right? Or I guess I shouldn't say a bunch, but say again?
Yeah, sorry, I was saying that Kong implements it.
So Nginx
says Nginx does it.
Mattia.
Yeah. So what do Kong and Nginx do with bidirectional stuff?
What do you mean? What Kong does with bidirectional stuff?
Does Kong support bidirectional gRPC?
Oh yeah, it should. I'm not very aware of the proxy internals, but yeah, we are compliant with gRPC route, and the Kong is compliant with gRPC bidirectional streaming. I
And
mean,
how you like and do
yeah, sorry. Your point about using two different gRPC routes for bidirectional streaming, I don't know about it. I mean, bidirectional streaming is always instantiated by the client, right? So I think that we should have one route by connection instantiation. Even if the stream is bidirectional, the connection is instantiated by the client. So what's the point of adding a different route for the
So
opposite direction of streaming?
I want to just do a time check here. This is a
Yeah,
good
let's-
conversation, but because this
Yeah.
is not blocking 1.2, I would recommend taking this to PR.
Yeah.
And then we can follow up from there.
yeah, it is it's pretty fascinating and messy.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Christine, for taking that on last minute. And I think we did make some good progress there. And we'll have lots of conversations around this still to go. All right. Next up is Mike's PR for configurable retries. I saw you push some good updates recently. Where do you feel this one is, Mike?
I'm hoping to finish up today. It looks like there's only a few open questions on it. I took a read through most of those last night, and I think that I can wrap stuff up to a point where it should be approvable, hopefully later today. I think Nick may have already left a tentative approval on it. I think one of the bigger open questions was just around like the string versus int syntax and must versus should on like 5xx. For what it's worth, the initial recommendation of like supporting a few specific error codes as required and then having 5xx as optional was informed by what existing proxies currently support. So I think if you flip that around and look at it from like a UX first perspective, the 5xx is definitely the preferable UX of it would be ideal if for most users probably to retry all 5xx errors, but I did not see that supported on I think like Nginx and HA proxy. So I guess at this point the biggest ask for me is I would love to get eyes from non-Envoy proxy implementations to see if this is something that feels supportable for you in the current proposal.
Just to clarify, are you saying, and and thank you for writing this all up because this was an incredibly well-written gap, but yeah, and also just the details of lack of portability, I guess, around these codes is frustrating, but whatever. But you're if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that some codes, like some implementations, support specifying individual 500 codes, but they would like. Could they
I think most
implement 5xx?
implementations.
Right.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is, could they implement 5xx by just like if behind the scenes they just added a bunch of 500 status codes?
Yeah,
Even
that's
if they-
basically my question for implementation owners is like a few of them list like 500, 502, 503, and 504 are the only statuses that they support retrying. So like if you got, I don't know, like a 507 or something, somebody added a new 5xx error code that's like not a standard one. I want eyes from other proxy implementations to better understand like, is that supportable for you?
Yeah. That makes sense. And I'm also open to an interpretation of 5xx, which means like any of a set of common 500 error codes, but not necessarily every like 599 or whatever. Like, you know, if that's really uncommon, then maybe that's okay that it's not supported. I'm not
I'm
sure,
a
but yes,
little
more.
worried about that because then it becomes more inconsistent. Where
Yeah.
if your application has a weird 5 something error code, you get different behavior between implementations.
Yeah, you're right.
I kind of feel like, wow, how do I phrase this one?
Why? Why,
I
Mike?
kind of feel,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, I kind of feel like if your application is using some completely non-standard 5YZ code, then whatever. As long as we say, hey, 5XX means that we will retry 502, 503, 504, and whatever the set is, then I kind of feel like it's probably okay to say that things beyond that are implementation specific. But
Yeah,
I would
but
have to look closer because I think there was some difference between what proxy is considered to be in that set. Like, I think Envoy's set is different than Nginx's, and like one of them excludes 500, but does retry like 502, 503, 504, or something like that. It's yeah, I could take
Yeah.
a closer look at what might be implementable with the existing proxy APIs, but if anybody wants to update their proxy, please comment on this.
and it's not configurable, Mike. Like it's not configurable. You mentioned there are differences between implementations, but it's not configurable. Like,
so the way in which proxies do this is it should be spelled out pretty thoroughly because I did a lot of just copy paste from the actual proxy docs into this. So some of them have like groups of things. Like, yeah, here's an example of I forget what, if you scroll up a minute, I forget which proxy this is under. That
This
might
one's
be
Nginx.
okay, that's Nginx, yeah. So like you can specify like those like specific ones, but they don't have a general purpose like any 5XX, and they don't have like a all of these 4 500 error codes. And I think
oh
HA
wait,
proxies
you only get to pick one of those?
you can pick all of them.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. My
but
understanding is you can pick all of them. Yeah.
But you don't have like 5 to 9, for example. So then if we require all the implementations to be complied with like 5XS, it means that there should be any like an intermittent like translation like if I got 5 to 9 translate to, I don't know, 503, which is gonna be weird. If we want to ever support like 500 to 599.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's near impossible for other implementations to do 500 to 599. So I think the question becomes: is it okay to interpret 5XX as at least these 4 status codes, like 500, 502, 503, 504,
We have
and
something
others are
else.
implementation specific?
We have something else written somewhere of like 5XX error codes that are not understood should effectively be treated as a 500 or something like that, I think.
Yeah.
I forget where in the docs that is.
That sounds...
Yeah, but what would you do like if we only ever support this like 4 statuses? Like what would you do if you have a weird application that actually have a weird 5XX error and they want to retry on it?
Oh, that's still listed under may support. So like,
Yeah.
so that's open. Some proxies allow specifying like any error code within the like 100 to 600 range or the 100 to like 999 range. So it's like you can do that if your proxy chooses to support it, but that's far less common.
Yeah, exactly. It's very straightforward to, have the non-portable values here. It's the portable ones that are very difficult to define, I would say.
More so than the error codes, what I'm actually would also like eyes on is the must retry connection failures bit. That seems to be like an implicit default for some proxies. Envoy has like 7 different granular ways of opting into different variations of that, which seems excessive. It seems simplest to just approach this as like yeah, connection failure should be retried. And then I could take
Is
we
it
take a closer
is
look
this
to figure out like what
specifically
that means.
is this where you're wanting the feedback?
Yes. Yeah, those two
One
lines.
one of the things that's nice about the array of strings idea for specifying what to retry on is that you can include things like connection failure and
Well,
make
the
that
problem is
explicit.
connection failure is interpreted wildly differently between different proxies.
I was, yeah, I realize that doesn't fully address what
Yep.
you're talking about, but
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, I think
Yeah.
we should do a time check on this one too. Thank you, Mike. I am hopeful we can get this one in, but please leave your comments or leave your reviews in the next 24 hours. Otherwise, I think we're just going to merge, in 40. Like, I think this is very close. The standard is just my biggest, what we've talked about here, the standardization for what to retry on. But yeah, that's the big thing. Please get your comments in, especially if you happen to be working on an Nginx or HA proxy implementation. We sure could use some feedback to keep us honest here, because there's a pretty heavy bias among Envoy-based implementations. So yeah, cool. All right, next up, the rest should be fairly straightforward. Experimental to standard, timeouts and duration. I'm calling that complete. Thank you, Flynn. I know you've got follow-ups
you.
coming. Supported features, talked about that to start the call. It's on track. It should merge today, barring any blocking feedback. Back in TLS, I think conformance tests are in progress, but nothing is graduating this time. Backend protocol, good to go. In cluster gateway, good for this phase. Thank you, Keith. I'm going to leave mine all the way to the end. Flynn, you don't like gRPC route stuttering. Let's talk about that.
I don't ever like gRPC stuttering anyway. I actually put this on because it came up in Slack where somebody was pointing out, hey, are we stuck with this for all time? And it was, I feel like this get predates my serious involvement in Gateway API, for which I apologize, as I have apologized for a lot of things that predated mine. But it is interesting to look at this one and see that the stuttering is called out if you scroll down a little bit there. Oh, I'm sorry, you were actually already on the right place and I just missed it. Maybe there's an example. Maybe if you scroll up, the example is there. Yeah, so under the rules matches, we have method, and then we have method.service and method.method. There are a lot of ways where I feel like this kind of stuttering is itself always an indication that maybe there's not a lot of value in pushing these things down into a dictionary in the first place. If you can't think of meaningful different things for the name of the dictionary versus the name of the element of the dictionary, this is probably an indication. And I actually wonder, is there a good reason why we couldn't just move service and method out of that method dict in some future version of the API and call it good to get rid of the stuttering?
As long as you are volunteering to maintain something to automatically convert, conversion webhook would be really great. I know you really love those.
You don't need a conversion webhook for that. That's a bit of API that's probably okay. You wouldn't be able to call it method. It's true, because somebody already stole that name for that dictionary, right?
Oh, so what you're saying is add new fields
Yes.
that are exclusive. And
Given that
okay.
we just took gRPC route to standard, we can't do that kind of a breaking change, but we could just move them out and not have the extra layer in there.
You make it sound like
I'm-
that's really easy.
Well,
I'm not.
Mostly what I'm curious about is, does anybody remember why they were down in this why the extra layer is there in the first place.
All I remember is I called that out and was unhappy with it. I can't remember why we justified leaving it in. So I'd have to dig through GitHub history for that. But if the answer is not obvious, it's worth exploring, bringing it out to top level. But man, it's really unfortunate to have a method matcher that isn't called method. So yeah,
You ain't wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay. So Richard's answer here is that it's
No, that's not an artifact. I mean, okay, let me phrase that differently. I think that what that's saying is that gRPC calls one of those things method, which is a little unfortunate given that HTTP has method and things like that. But that still isn't really an answer for why we needed to have it in a stanza also called method.
Well, Richard did do all the spelunking for us, so this is the conversation.
Awesome.
Let's go back to that.
I
But
will.
Guy has a couple more things, so let's
Yeah,
run to that.
Many thanks to Richard. I don't know if Richard is on this call, but many thanks for doing the spelunking there, and I will go take a look at that.
Yeah, this is fun. This is 2+ years ago. If you leave a comment, I'll follow up there because it's fun to relive old discussions.
That a touch
Okay.
of sarcasm, Rob?
No, I mean, it actually, this is the days where Harry Harry was really, I think, the first person involved from Kong back in the day, and he's the first person to call that out. So that's fun.
I too find ancient issues riveting, Rob.
Yeah.
We all know how serious
it's
Shane
what gets
is
me
about
up in the
everything.
morning.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Guy, you've got some work coming up. What are you still on the call?
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. In the spirit of saving time, I dropped one of my bullet points there, and I will focus on this one. And this is basically, I guess, me trying to figure out what's the best way to progress on that, right? Of the enhancements on policy attachment. A while ago, I've dropped a few comments there. Special thanks to Mike for always being the one that's always there to give me some replies. So thank you for that. And I've also been seeing a couple other issues popping up here and there. And I wonder if what could be the best way to try to bring some of those things under this one umbrella of the enhancements on policy attachment. And I think one example here could be the one on the supporting the gateway class name in the target ref from you, Rob. In this discussion, I think there's some proposals, especially from Nick, on how he believes that everything that we call the policy spec metadata could be structured, right? Things like the target ref itself, but as well as other things like the merge strategy, those things that we've been discussing. Anyway, so basically looking for some advice here on what's the best way to progress. I know we're currently focused on 1.2, and this is mainly aiming for 1.3, but it's still as the next steps here on my to-do list.
Yeah, no, thank you. I know that we've all been wanting to see policy attachment move, and I would say I think that we've come to the consensus, and I'll chat with Nick internally. Well, not internally, but just I'll chat with him next to he's online. I don't know why I said internally, but I think we've basically said that policy attachment doesn't really fit into our release cycle because we're not really releasing any artifacts. So we've just kind of let it exist outside. And so if you have updates, I think getting them out sooner than later is actually useful. That's Shane or Mattia, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but that's I think where we've landed on policy attachment, that updates are better sooner than later because we're just kind of refining a model, an attachment, like it's not an API surface directly.
I mean, sooner is better, sure. If there's something that somebody's going to push for.
Yeah, direction we go, I can see also how some of the proposals there could have an impact on policies that do make part of the release, such as the backend TLS post, right? So depending on the kind of thing we would recommend to be the structure for the target graph, just to give one example, then maybe could have an effect on those kinds of policies. But in general, I completely agree, right? So and I believe I can try to push for some iteration on that, regardless of the release, for sure. Maybe one thing that I could do is I can try to summarize some of the main ideas that we had, because they started with a few bullet points and then they expanded in a bunch of discussion. Maybe it's time to try to narrow it down again to back to a list of bullet points so people can vote and approve on them.
Yep. I think that would be incredible. Yeah, thank you for following up on this. Yeah, really looking forward to see policy attachment move forward and clean up some of these rough edges. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Cool. And I think with that, we've hit time. I'll just leave this open. Thank you, Mike, for leaving a comment here. If anyone else has feedback on the release cycle, don't hesitate to ping on Slack or just leave some thoughts here. This is the first time we've tried a release cycle. And so we're trying to get an idea for what timing works, what doesn't. But thank you everyone for being part of it. And yeah, with that, thanks everyone.
Cheers.
And we'll see you next week.
I think that having a release cycle is a good idea.